What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Wicked Prepping YouTube channel. What you're about to see is highlights from our past stream. If you'd like to see the whole stream, you can click the link in the description box below, which will take you to an unlisted video showing the whole podcast. We stream usually 3 times a week on Twitch. If you would like to follow us, join the conversation, smash that like button here on YouTube, follow us on Twitch, and let's start talking.
All teams ready?
You are discrediting. Resistance is futile.
I want to do an update on the lab release, and I put in quotation marks conspiracy because I don't think it's that much of a conspiracy. I think it's a completely plausible situation, but I wanted to give an update on it because, once again, we're seeing this flood of articles go out saying, oh, it's impossible that it came from a lab. And I thought it was interesting. I found an article from NPR, actually out of the UNC, which is University of North Carolina, right down the road from us. So I thought it was kind of interesting, and I wanted to touch on that. And one of the reasons I want to touch on it is because, like I always point out, you really have to check your sources and what's going on, because there's a lot of deception in the media. So basically, they came out with this article saying virus researchers cast doubt on theory of coronavirus lab accident. And this writer basically said virus researchers say there's virtually no chance that the new coronavirus was released as a result of a laboratory accident in China or anywhere else. And this is a really pointed article, really trying to drive home a point. So the assessment made by more than a half dozen scientists familiar with lab accidents and how research on coronavirus is conducted cast doubt on recent claims that a mistake may have unleashed the coronavirus on the world. The accident theory has been advanced by the Trump administration in recent weeks. So immediately you already see a political tone taken with this and an ideology coming out. So that should tip you off right there. Hey, I really need to be careful about what this is saying. So they go on. But after corresponding with 10 leading scientists who collect samples of viruses from the animals in the world, study virus genomes, and understand how lab accidents can happen, NPR found that an accidental release would have required a remarkable series of coincidences and deviations from well-established experimental protocols. Well, you have a remarkable series of coincidences all the time. We have planes crash, and it's never one thing. It's a chain of 50 different crazy coincidences that all happen. So that's a bad argument to make in the first place. But then she starts quoting these expert scientists that they've talked to. And so we have all the evidence points to this not being a laboratory accident, says Jonah Mazet, a professor of epidemiology at the University of California, Davis, and director of a global project to watch for emerging viruses called PREDICT. My question is, what evidence? Because they love to throw this out, all the evidence, but they never give you any evidence. So that drives me nuts. Then it goes on, rather, the experts interviewed by NPR all believe that the virus was transmitted between animals and humans in nature, as it has happened in previous outbreaks, yada, yada, yada. The real risk is in the wild and the way people interact with wildlife around the world, says Peter Daszak, president of EcoHealth Alliance in New York City, a group that researches the origins of pandemics. That's where we need to be focused if we want to really do something about the prevailing next pandemic. Now, I want you to kind of, in your mind, remember some of these names because we're going to come back to them. So we had Jonah Mazet, Peter Daszak. And then they say researchers believe that SARS-CoV-2 likely made its way to people directly through bats or through an intermediate animal. Early focus on the source of the outbreaks in Wuhan was on a major seafood market that also sold wild animals. Then they put the though in there. Though conclusive evidence proving the market was the origin of the virus has not yet emerged. Of course not. Regardless, and that's one of those connecting words that I love, that's sort of like, well, I'm really sorry, but Regardless, genetic analysis shows that the virus began to spread sometime in the fall or winter of 2019, says Robert Gary, remember that name, a microbiologist at Tulane University. The same analysis refuted an earlier theory that the virus was genetically engineered in a laboratory. Well, genetically engineered is different from being released and they were just studying it. Gary says the reason is simple. The virus infects people in a way that scientists had never seen before. The virus is just really too good at what it's doing, he says. No human using a computer could do this. This is very clearly a natural process that has occurred. There are no signs of human genetic modification in the virus's code. First of all, again, nobody's saying that it was engineered like a computer would do. Second of all, this is what you constantly hear. I call it the ancient aliens theory, where we consistently underestimate the human capacity and potential. Humans are capable of doing incredible things. We're fixing to send people to Mars. There's no telling what we could do with viruses. Saying, oh, we could never do this, that's crazy. And he says there's no signs of human genetic modification, but we don't have the original samples or data from China because they've destroyed everything and didn't release it. So all we have are later blood samples of later mutations and whatnot. So who knows what the originals were? But again, that's not even really the point. The point is the samples just could have leaked. Then they finish up by saying these protocols are used by scientists all over the world, including in China. Mazet says that the staff at Wuhan Institute of Virology, where much of the suspicion has been focused, has been trained by U.S. scientists as part of the PREDICT program. And the scientists there, they follow the rules, Mazet says. Mazet says researchers at the Wuhan Institute were so good they actually helped to shape protocols. This is completely contradicted by the State Department cables that were leaked, as well as reports from numerous other researchers familiar with the Chinese programs and the actual safety record in China. That's baloney. And this argument that, well, so we trained them through our PREDICT program, so therefore they must be perfect and couldn't have made a mistake or had any accident, is a huge conflict of interest. If you're the one that trained them, then you shouldn't be the one talking about whether or not the safety procedures were good or not. That should come from an independent source. Then at the very bottom of the article, they put in, now it is possible for viruses to escape from a laboratory by infecting workers, and they kind of go on and cite one case in 2003. It happened in Singapore. It wasn't even related to the Chinese labs. They buried this inconvenient evidence to the contrary way at the bottom of the article, then explained it away, and they cherry-picked the easiest and to tear apart and oldest example to ridicule, ignoring all the other long list of lab accidents and issues that they've had in the Chinese labs. Then they finish up, there is not enough genetic evidence to know how this particular zoonotic spillover took place, but it's clear that natural spillovers happen, including in China. So we don't know how. It could be a lab accident, could be natural spillover, but it's clear that it's natural spillover. Absolutely ridiculous.
That's some political double talk for you. Right there. It's a real shame that conspiracy theories can get to where they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they say right in their article, they promote them basically by saying shit like that. They say there's proof that it's from genetics, but we're not saying it's from genetics, but it is genetic. It's ridiculous. Why don't they just come out and say what they're trying to say?
Yeah, it's insane. And I don't want to beat a dead horse, and I know this is getting long, but this kind of stuff just really pisses me off, and I like to share it with people so they can kind of see it and kind of understand what to look for. So despite the evidence, misinformation about the virus's origins continue to proliferate. For Dazik, who has worked on other outbreaks, the pattern is all too familiar. Every time we get a new virus emerging, we have people say this could have come from a lab. What's unusual about this outbreak, he says, is that senior officials in both China and the U.S. have traded accusations that each nation is somehow responsible for the virus. None of this has anything to do with whether or not it could have been leaked or not. And then he concludes by saying it's a real shame that the conspiracy theories can get to a level they've got with policymakers. No, it's a shame for Daszak because that policy impacts his grant funding and professional path, which we're going to look at. So real quickly, I kind of wanted to go over, and I guess I had one more slide here. Oh, and then he just reemphasized that the political heat has strained the very scientific collaboration meant to detect these viruses as they emerge, warns Jonah Mazet. The PREDICT system she runs relies on the voluntary cooperation of many countries with researchers freely sharing data. So you have this influence of money and grants and needing to work places. These aren't the people you want telling you whether or not something leaked. So let's look at some of these people. So you had Dr. Simon Anthony, Jonah Mazet, and Dr. Peter Daszak. All three of these people work for EcoHealth Alliance. Jonah Mazet was a principal investigator of and served as the global director of PREDICT for 10 years. Peter Daszak is the president. He's the chairman of the board, and he's a regular advisor to WHO on pathogen prioritization for research and development. And we know who's in the pocket of China, so he's not going to say anything that contradicts that because he gets paid a lot of money to advise them and gets grants and things through that. Then you've got Robert F. Gary Jr. So he works out of Tulane, but he's repeatedly written things about how the corona pandemic sparked by nature, not bioengineering. So he's already on the record before any of this information really started to get out about the lab and the possibility there. So he's going to defend what he's already said out there. Furthermore, he happens to be the co-founder of Zheng-Li Labs, which has a partnership with Tulane University and is under contract with the World Health Organization, or WHO. Crazy. Then they had also mentioned an associate professor, Limpo Lian, who was one of these supposed 10 experts. She got her master's of public health from Tulane. So what do you want to bet that Professor Gary Jr. had a pretty good relationship with her? And she did her infectious disease fellowship at Tulane. So I don't know if you're kind of sensing a pattern here, but this group of experts is, in fact, a closely tied fraternity of researchers, all sharing one view. It's not a balanced panel as implied by the article. It's like the author interviewed one of the individuals and then asked, hey, who else would you recommend that I talk to, and can you help connect me with them? There are tons and tons of researchers, scientists on the other side of the equation who are saying that, and we've talked and done graphics and things with them on past live streams, who say this very well could have been a lab leak or accident, and people who have spent years and years in the lab safety profession that are independent and not tied to these people. So I would much rather hear their opinion. However, none were included in this balanced article. Finally, you got Peter Daszak, who's kind of the kingpin of the whole thing. So he just tweeted the other day, this was April 28th, yesterday, and he says a top priority should be identifying bat COVIDs and developing better diagnostic tests. This essentially means continuing on a much larger scale what researchers such as, and then he self-promotes himself at Peter Daszak, and she had been doing before their funding ended this year. So they've had a ton of their funding cut by Trump and the administration. Not only did they cut things off to the WHO, but they cut off funding to the Institute of Virology in Wuhan, and all their grant money's drying up from this stuff. Now, it's really important to understand. He links to an article here and talks about Xi. This is Xi Zheng-Li. This is the bat lady of Wuhan. This is their lead bat researcher in China there. So, there's no conflict of interest with defending her lab safety. I mean, are you kidding me? Nothing to see here. Just move along. There was no problems there. He has a relationship and is promoting this person who's the leading bat person there. So, and it gets worse than that because there are a couple, he has like a 20-year track record of writing academic articles. So I want to point some of them out because it just shows you how deep this runs. So in January 2020, a strategy to prevent future epidemics similar to the COVID outbreak that he wrote. And he talks about international collaboration among scientists is essential. You're going to see that he does a lot of international collaboration, specifically with the labs in Wuhan. November 2017. Discovery of a rich gene pool of bat SARS-related coronavirus provides new insights into the origin of SARS coronavirus. Notice Peter Daszak wrote it. Guess who's on there? The bat lady, Zheng-Li Shi. December 2015. Isolation and characterization of the novel bat coronavirus. He's deep into the bats. Again, Peter Daszak and the bat lady. And it's specifically, she was the lead writer on, not the lead writer, that was Xinglu Yang, but she was the second most important. She's the one that all correspondence goes to. Then you've got October 2013, isolation and characterization of bats, yada, yada, yada. Again, Peter Daszak and the bat lady. And it specifically notes that the bat lady is from the Center of Emerging Infectious Diseases of the Laboratory of Virology in Wuhan. Now, just to further illustrate this, if you look into all these authors, here's a list on the right-hand side. All these people are connected to the Institute of Virology in Wuhan. These authors are all part of his group at EcoHealth. And these names repeatedly appear for 15 plus years. He's been involved in personal research with these people at these specific labs. Of course, he's going to come out and say, oh, their safety record's perfect. Couldn't possibly have been a leak. A, because these people are close to him. B, because he wants to grant. This is what he does. He studies bats in the wild. He wants the money for doing that. Then you got 2013, another one, Peter Daszak and the Bat Lady. Oh, hang on. Never mind. I redid it. October 2007, the Bat Lady, Peter Daszak. October, all the way back to 2005, Peter Daszak and the Bat Lady. This article actually talked about collecting bat samples from 408 bats in the Hubei region, and all the testing on it was done in our laboratories in Wuhan. And on top of that, it also notes that this work was jointly funded by a special grant from the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology. So he's getting money from China, making money off all this research. That's how he gets paid. So of course he's not going to sit there and say China made a mistake or leaked something. And then finally, all the way back to January of 2000, where he was talking about, the threat to biodiversity and human health from diseases in wildlife. So basically, there's a long-term link between Daszak and the Bat Lady, the Institute of Virology in Wuhan, the study of COVID in bats, and the professional assertion that the threat is from wildlife. And that's been highly established looking at all these things. And it destroys his professional credibility and that of his colleagues to objectively assess the safety level of labs in China, specifically Wuhan, and the potential that COVID-19 could have resulted from a lab leak. So what we have is a one-sided circle of bias, self-affirming logic and groupthink. And as usual, this article one presented an ideological, politically biased article and failed to provide any notice to the readers regarding this conflict of interest that is massive. As such, all these pointed assertions, findings, conclusions that are presented here, they can't be accepted as either valid or legitimate and still maintain any shred of a healthy professional skepticism. For Daszak and the other experts that were cited in this, it's personal. These are his lifelong friends, associates, colleagues. He spent years working with them in the field, in their labs. His own EcoHealth Alliance established the lab safety protocols there and trained them. It's professional. His professional credibility and worldview is at stake. 20 plus years of asserting that the threat is wildlife and that's the source of pandemics. He and the other experts are also linked to the WHO, an organization clearly in the pocket of China, and which has repeatedly and emphatically denied even the possibility of a lab release. And it's financial. His work requires financial funding through grants. He's a researcher in international cooperation to continue. He has ties to the WHO. He's received grants from China. There's a huge conflict of interest here, none of which was noted in the article. So I just wanted to point that out because it kind of followed up on our whole thing, and you're going to see more and more and more of this with people coming out defending that, oh, it wasn't a lab accident. Be very careful about taking what they say. Take it with a grain of salt. Always check your sources.
I mean, definitely, and you've done a ridiculously detailed job here checking these sources, Doug. And Harbinger makes a very good point that, well, let me ask you a couple questions first. Have you put all this into a detailed article yet with your sources and with your graphics?
This one I'm going to make into an article.
All right, so when that's up and it's on our website, you let me know, and I'm going to start spamming it like crazy on Twitter and on Facebook, and we're going to get Alex Jones tagged in. We're going to be sending over to Fox News, because that's the type of information, the disinformation that we've been trying to stop the spread of, since that is a clear-cut case of a conspiracy theory trying to be covered up. And you can't, it's not even a conspiracy theory, it's just a theory being covered up. And when you take all those sources back, and they've known for 20 years, documented for 20 years, that this is going to happen, and this could happen, they've known about these viruses, how they affect humans, and that they can transmit from wet markets, it almost seems like the perfect crime. They've been working on 20 years developing in a lab, so of course they're going to be pushing that narrative that it didn't leak from a lab, there's no way. When in reality, they could have been working on this for 15, 20 years and, making the virus enhanced. They've had a long time. Like, obviously, no one's going to wake up tomorrow, go get on a computer and be able to create a virus, but if they have 20 years to study and force mutate a virus to make it horrible for humans more than it should be, then, that's a whole other conspiracy theory for Conspiracy Theory Sunday right there that you kind of open Pandora's box. And I know we've talked about that before a little bit, but you have a lot more evidence here that kind of really backs up that thought process, where the people who are saying the most that it's not a lab leak are probably the ones that have the most evidence clearly that it could be, and the ones that are pushing the narrative, and the ones that are pushing the narrative, they have the most to lose to find out if it was a lab leak. But at the same time, they're trying to profit off the crisis by saying, well, look, this was obviously from the wet market, and 20 years ago we told you it was wet market, so we need more money for research to help prevent this from happening in the future. So why? I mean, they could stand to gain financially. They could stand to financially gain from this substantially if they can convince enough people with backing that their work wasn't taken seriously enough back in the day, and that they need more money and they need more facilities and everything like that. I mean, research is 100% funded by donations and by governments and by convincing people there's a need for it.
A great majority of that from government funding. They do get private funding and whatnot, but the majority for that type of research is government funding.
And it's kind of like we always say, if you just follow the money, you follow the funding sources, and you follow the WHO and China, then these people, these researchers, these experts aren't going to come out and bash China and make them look weak because China's paying them.
No, because they'll never be back.
Right, and they'll never be able to go back.
They'll never be able to go back and research the bats. And look, I'm not saying the guy had any bad intentions. He's devoted to it. He's committed to it. This is his life. He doesn't want to hurt all the professional relationships that he's built over 20 years. He doesn't want to harm his ability to continue doing what he's doing and have access to that stuff. it just makes him incredibly biased. He's not the one that has any standing to say something could have leaked or not leaked. He's
Exactly, yeah.
total conflict of
And
interest.
so these are the people that NPR and other, typically left sources are quoting, and they're using to tell you, it didn't come from. There's no way it was a lab leak.
And look, it had to be by design. You couldn't randomly contact researchers and scientists out there
That are that interconnected.
and happen all 10 of them are that interconnected. This was clearly one said, hey, talk to this person, talk to that person, and they all kind of got together. And the author had to have known that. And if they didn't, they're an idiot and didn't do their due diligence. Just a horrible article.
So before we jump into your next topic, which was immunity, let's catch up on some
let's
chat
catch
here,
up. I know. That
oh,
was
no,
long.
you're good. You're fine. It's just, like I said, that's why we kind of put in our rules down in the panel that when we're in on a topic, we're not going to always be responding to the chat, but we are keeping up with it. I'm actively reading it, and we're going to get a chance to catch up to it right now.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Basically, all the way back to where you had the article up, where you had the ancient aliens picture.
Yeah.
When you had the article up, I put a text chat in the thing saying I thought that was a banner ad that was just on the article that you screen grabbed.
Oh no!
I didn't realize that you before you got to that point. So I was like, wow, I love the ancient aliens banner. Like I was like, that's some interesting advertising.
No, that would be interesting. No, I put that on there because that's the argument they always make about ancient alien conspiracy. Oh, we couldn't have built this. We weren't that smart and that good.
But we definitely were.
Yeah,
obviously
we were. Absolutely, we build incredible things.
Right.
Always have.
So Harbinger goes to say that there's so many China apologist articles and reports, like everyone's trying to make sure that because a lot of them are funded by Chinese sources, and they're going to say, oh my God, China, they're so great. It's insane. It was the bats. It wasn't their lab. At any rate, then John was kind of trolling. He was he was acting like the stuff you were saying wasn't satirical. If you read here, he says there's no way these experts trained guys messed up. Sometimes it does happen, sometimes, but not these guys because we trained them. He was
but not these guys. They're perfect.
And then Harbinger gave you props on your research here. He wants to make sure that we get this stuff labeled out, sent out to Alex Jones or Fox News or somebody. But yeah, so then John says, and the scientists and the researchers stand to face treason and worldwide punishment if it's found out that they allowed this to happen. This displays the narrative but unfortunately, the data to support the truth is very likely destroyed. And I mean, I
don't think they had anything to do with it happening.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
They're just
trying to say
China uses everybody. They bring over our brightest because they're trying to catch up to us, and they bring us over there to kind of help, but they're using us the whole time. And that gets back to the whole, they say, well, there's no signs of genetic tampering. But their program over there is run by the military. It's top secret. We have no way to know exactly what type of backbone or backbone changes when it comes to RNA and DNA splicing that they're using, and we don't have the initial samples of everything. So we're getting mutated samples. So you can't make an absolute statement like that. It's bad, just bad journal. You don't have the facts to do that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is the problem I have with it is that they're telling everybody this is just the truth. We have experts that back it up. Well, you can get experts in anything if you pay them enough money to say anything, or if the governing body back them. Just because you're an expert doesn't mean you're honest. Just because you're an expert or a scientist doesn't mean you're morally balanced, or that you have the right agenda, or you don't have an agenda, or you're unbiased. That's why study results, if they are conducted correctly, are so important, because study results can be unbiased.
Right. You release them, they're peer reviewed. Everybody with different biases can all review that data and say, yeah, the conclusions you drew are legitimate.
So this is equivalent to somebody who's an expert on anything writing a personal blog, and then now it's fact. And that's what I don't like about it.
No, absolutely nothing to back it up.